Hi, good morning. Been a while. Sorry. Yeah, there were three grants due back to back to back. And yeah, it took a bit out of me. So the last one, to give you a picture of what this is like, it's not as simple as just, can I please have some money? It's 12 pages, and then it had about 100 references in there. And it had eight other supporting documents, and then you have to kind of edit all these things because there's seven parts that are about that size. Actually, eight parts. Yeah, yeah. Boy, that's something. That's something. But yeah, a lot of moving parts. Hopefully, moving in the right direction. Anyway, hello, welcome back. I'm Dr. Ben Newman. I'm a coronavirus researcher, and yeah, apparently I am obeying the Wadsworth constant, which says you can skip past the first 30% of any YouTube video and you don't miss a darn thing. So, to the questions. So the three, I'm going to go in reverse order from most recent to most distant past, because that might actually do somebody some good. I'm going to get through all of them though. There are three we can tackle at the same time. They are from Chintz, Parker, and Tony. Yeah, what's up, everybody? So, the questions all center around vaccines and boosters. And so, let's look at the questions. All right, fine. Question one. Can you mix and match brands of the vaccine? It's already happening in some countries, definitely. Yeah, can you do it here? All right. Second question. If a person's had the J&J vaccine, is it okay to get an mRNA vaccine as their booster when it's available? Good question. Yeah. Third question. Let's see. I read the article. I'm not sure if I'm eligible to get a booster shot, but it sure seems like one since we got this particular vaccine. And so, yeah, let's talk. There we are. All right. So there was a recent study that came out, I think it's about 2 weeks ago now, and it actually finally looked at answers to all these questions. And so we can say not just there's no scientific reason why it wouldn't work, we can say it does work. Ah, that's so much better. So, what this study showed, which I think was very nice, is they took people who had had each of the three US vaccines. And so for Johnson & Johnson, think one dose of AstraZeneca if you are in a country where AstraZeneca is a thing, or think one dose of Sputnik or any of the other Chinese vaccines. Anyway, turns out one dose is nowhere near as good as two in terms of long-term antibody levels. In terms of protection against death, there still seems to be some protection, but it's, yeah, I don't know. I think a couple of things here. One, I wouldn't ever use the phrase fully vaccinated. I think that's a bad idea because we do not yet know what fully vaccinated looks like. Because fully vaccinated would mean you're vaccinated to the point where you don't need to be vaccinated anymore. And you should be good for, I don't know if it's decades or just a long, long time. And frankly, it'll take decades or a long, long time to know that for sure. But looking at the data we have now, nobody is fully vaccinated. Yeah. And so that's the other data point that's coming in here in the third question, is that from the vaccine meeting, which I think was toward the middle of September in the US, and you had similar meetings with the same data set being presented around the world, we saw that there was a pretty good fall off in antibodies over the 6 months or so after the second vaccination. And so by the time you get to the end of the second vaccination, the best you're looking at is probably 50-50 chance of being protected from infection, but still about a 80 to 90% chance of being protected from all the bad stuff, hospitalization, severe COVID, death. Yeah. And so it's not terrible, but it does suggest that we aren't at the right number of shots yet. Now, if you think about it, when various countries approved the vaccine, they were approving a vaccine and they were comparing it to the minimum bar. What's the least you can do and be considered a vaccine? And these vaccines were way over that bar. Yeah, they did a great job. But over the bar doesn't mean forever necessarily. And if you look at all the ones that we take as kids, I think there are only 3 that are routinely taken as 2-dose. I think it's the papilloma virus, the chickenpox virus, and I want to say hepatitis A, and that one, not even everybody takes that vaccine. So the rest of them usually are broken up into 3 or 4 or more doses. So they're not really boosters. It's just like a course of vaccines that's going to come out in more parts. And we know what the low end looks like. We know what constitutes the minimum that, like this looks like a vaccine, it'll do something good. We're still looking for where the high end is. So we're searching for certainty. So anyway, this paper on mixing and matching comes along, and it's a really good paper. They started with people with Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna that each had these. That had a certain amount of time since they'd had them. And then they looked at the amount of antibodies in their blood, and they found that for Moderna, it was the highest. For Johnson & Johnson, it was about 2/3 of Moderna. And for, for Moderna highest, Pfizer, 2/3 of Moderna, the 2 mRNA vaccines. There we go. For Johnson & Johnson, single dose, and I think it's the single dose here that gets you, not so much that it's this type of vaccine. They were barely detectable. It had something like 500, 350, and 85, if I remember right, for the average antibody titer, which is, right down near the limit of detection. So what it suggests is eventually, probably, we're going to move toward a system where it doesn't really matter which vaccine you've had, it matters how many doses you've had. Because each of the vaccines works pretty well, within, like error bars of each other. Although the hottest one still seems to be Moderna, but I've always said that you get 100 micrograms there where you only get 30 micrograms of Pfizer, and so it should work a little bit better because it's all the same stuff. And then the adenovirus vaccines are just barely a peg under the mRNA vaccines, but they're all right as long as you do 2 doses. And so that's the situation. This paper looked at it. They didn't find any adverse effects that were unusual for getting any of the doses. And in each one of those groups, they split them up and they gave some of the people each of the 3 vaccines. So a complete mix and match. And you know what? Everybody benefited. When you get a vaccine, as your antibodies are declining, you'll see this immediate boost in antibodies. And you're going to end up with somewhere between about 20 and 50 times as many antibodies. If I remember I'm trying to remember a graph here in my head, but I think that was the rough average number. And you're going to end up with many more antibodies than you had even right after the second vaccine. So it is literally boosting the total amount. And what the booster is doing is it is going to be calling on some of your memory B cells and T cells. It's going to wake those up and get those to divide again and just get a little bit more ready. And it's also going to go through the process and make some new ones. And so you end up diversifying your antibodies, you end up making more antibodies, and I think protection is going to be a lot better. It takes a while. It may take us another couple months to get actual data on protection for all of these people, but I am very optimistic. From the way it looks, I think we're probably heading toward 4 doses. That would be my bet, and put it in a sealed envelope and then just tear it up when I'm wrong. But in terms of effectiveness for the first dose, second dose, and third dose, we are doing almost exactly the same as polio vaccine. And so I would anticipate that polio is normally a 4-dose vaccine. I would anticipate that we will probably end up around that territory. If that gets you to immune for life, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be the best? Yeah, I think it would. I think it's fairly realistic. It is on the table right now. So to answer all your questions, scientifically and now based on actual data and not just based on logic anymore, there's no reason why you couldn't have X vaccine after having Y vaccine. And it looks as though nobody is fully vaccinated at 2 doses. Definitely not at 1 dose. Yeah. Sorry, Johnson. They're doing a thing. They figured there may be people that they could get to with 1 dose that would never get a second dose. And at least they're giving them some protection. So, that's fine. Hats off there. But we're probably moving toward 4. I would not get all 4 right away. There are considerations like if you've had antibody therapy, which doesn't do a lot of good, but makes a little bit of a difference for people in hospital, then they want you to generally wait a little bit after something like 3 months is the recommendation although most of the antibodies would be gone inside of a month. They'd just be an extra careful. They would say hold back on boosting within 3 months of being in the hospital and having antibody infusion. But yeah, everybody else, the vaccines appear to be a pretty good thing. So the other thing we got from that vaccine study is that everybody's antibodies, regardless of age group, drop off at about the same rate from the oldest person to the youngest person. Susceptibility drops off at the same rate. So you go from 90% protected in everybody down to about 50% protected in everybody. Not just old people, not just babies, everybody. Everybody who's had the vaccine long enough to be in this study. And so it would look like the benefit against being infected is pretty much universal. There are still greater risks for people who are old or obese or diabetic or pick, one of those things. And that's the greater risk that when you get infected, terrible things will happen. But there's a certain percentage of terrible things happening anyway to people, even when they don't have those things. And frankly, SARS-CoV-2, the virus behind COVID-19, is always going to kill the unvaccinated, as far as we can tell. And it's always going to kill a much smaller percentage, but definitely not zero, of the vaccinated until we get this thing under control. So, people, I'm talking to the wrong group here, but people, let's get vaccinated because we can end this thing and, actually, really, truly get to an end instead of just pretending like we have done before and seem to be about to do again right now. So, there you go. I think that's enough. Thanks very much. This has been Ask Dr. Ben.